Hi there, and welcome back to this channel if you have been here before, or welcome if you are new. I'm Sándor, and I'm here to talk about my eating disorder recovery and anything else that's related to the topic. Just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a medical professional or a therapist. I only talk about my recovery because I believe it can be helpful to hear that other people went through the same stuff you are going through and they came out the other end. Keep in mind that these are just my opinions and experiences. Nothing I say is meant to be prescriptive. Some of the things that work for me could work for you as well, but recovery takes some experimentation, and you need to be in charge of that. Today, I talk about a milestone in my eating disorder recovery, probably the biggest one, and that was the realization that my eating disorder is not some kind of external entity that I need to, beat or destroy or chase away or whatever, but it's a part of me that I need to heal and integrate back. I came to this realization when I was in therapy with my eating disorder, and my therapist was doing CBT with me, which to an extent worked, but it did not get me to a point where I could call myself fully recovered. So around this time, all those years of compulsive exercise and starvation caught up with me, and I ended up having some pretty serious health issues that required me to undergo surgery. I was in so much pain on the daily that for a couple of months I was barely able to leave the house or, function at all. And the thing was, the main issue could have been fixed by surgery, but I developed other issues that further complicated things. And I was told by doctors, multiple doctors, that there was nothing they could do to fix those complications. I had to wait until they got better on their own. And after that, I could have the surgery to fix the main thing. Since I was in constant pain and my symptoms didn't seem to improve, I felt like I had broken my body, and I was afraid that it would never function again properly. And that didn't help me to stay motivated, in my recovery, because I felt like, what's the point in getting better? What's the point in recovering when my body doesn't work anymore? I sure as shit didn't want to spend the rest of my life in a body that, was a source of constant pain. And the worst part was, I knew that I did this to my body, and I kept pushing my body beyond its limits, and I had been basically waging a war on my own body, and that's why I ended up where I was. Even though I didn't want to keep going with my recovery, admitting this to myself helped me realize that I wasn't just waging a war on my body while I was struggling with an eating disorder, I was waging a war on myself, and that is what kept me stuck in recovery. The actual realization came to me when I was practicing writing therapy, and I wrote a poem that came to this conclusion. And even though I felt and knew that this was some profound realization, I didn't really know where I could go from there. But soon after that, I came across a book by Caroline Costin and Gwen Schubert, which is called 8 Keys to Recover from an Eating Disorder. And this book contained a similar explanation on how people develop an eating disorder and how they can recover from it. The explanation that you can find in this book really resonated with me, and it really helped me to reframe how I think about having an eating disorder and how I should approach my own recovery. So let me try to explain this concept of having these two selves, having a healthy self and an eating disorder self. So when you have an eating disorder, a part of you has begun to, take on a life on its own and start to do things automatically. So, for example, if you try to lose weight and you are not allowed to eat certain type of foods, let's say you are not allowed to eat sweets, when you do eat some, you will likely feel that you are, weak or undisciplined or a failure. You are also likely to feel ashamed or guilty or something along those lines. Suppose you decide to get rid of those forbidden foods and calories you ate, and you go about this by purging your food. If purging your food gets rid of your guilt and shame as well, not just the food itself, purging will become reinforced as a coping mechanism. And soon you will start using this coping mechanism, this maladaptive coping mechanism, to cope with guilt, shame, or any other uncomfortable feeling or emotion, not just when these emotions are related to food and eating, but in general, every time you experience an overwhelming or an uncomfortable emotion. this can become such an easy and automatic and convenient way to deal with your emotions. It's so easy to go from using an eating disorder behavior once to deal with some kind of situation or feelings to, you know what, I know how to deal with this, and proceed with your eating disorder behavior to deal with anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. And there you are. Purging has become your main way, your main coping mechanism to deal with your emotions. And if you keep doing this long enough, it will become, engaging in these eating disorder behaviors will become automatic. It will become a way to maintain homeostasis, a way to get you through the day. And that's what I meant when I said that when you have an eating disorder, a part of you has begun to take on a life on its own. And even though this part of you, which we like to refer to as your eating disorder self, is trying to protect you and it's trying to be there for you, it operates from a very disordered and destructive place. And the longer you have an eating disorder, the stronger your eating disorder self will become. And that will make it easier for your eating disorder self to take control and drown out your healthy self, the healthy part of you. Your healthy self, just for clarification, is a part of you that knows how to deal with whatever life throws at you in a healthy way, or at least knows what other people should do in a similar situation. Remember, if your healthy self has been repressed for a long time, it may not know how to stand up to your eating disorder self, but it usually knows what is healthy for someone else. And the goal in recovery is to strengthen this healthy part of you until it can stand up to the eating disorder part of you. So eventually your healthy self will become strong enough to take over the role that your eating disorder self is playing currently. And at that point, your eating disorder self will be out of a job, basically, and you can integrate it back. And over time, during this integration process, your eating disorder self basically becomes this internal alarm system that lets you know that you need to pay attention to something that's going on inside of you. As I said, the goal, according to this philosophy you can find in this book, is to strengthen your healthy self until it can take the job of your eating disorder self. And there are many ways to do this. For example, you can practice talking back to your eating disorder thoughts. By challenging these eating disordered thoughts, you gain more awareness of them and you get better at counteracting them and responding from a healthier place. And when you practice responding to your eating disorder thoughts from a healthier place, eventually you will be able to engage in this dialogue between your healthy self and your eating disorder self and talk yourself out of engaging in your eating disorder behaviors. Another thing that you can do to bring your healthy self forward, and this was one of the first things I did after reading about this concept in the 8 Keys book, was a writing assignment in this book. Basically, you can write a thank you letter to your eating disorder to understand better what purpose it is serving. You can start by thanking your eating disorder self for whatever you think it has done for you. For example, helping you to numb your emotions before you are, able to face them. You can tell your eating disorder, what do you think would have happened without it being there for you? Then you can read over the letter and come up with and write down alternatives for how you could have handled those situations or how you would handle them now without your eating disorder behaviors. So I think the important thing is to write down anything you can think of without overanalyzing it. And I'm saying this because that's what I did when I wrote this letter. And that's not the point of this assignment. The point is to bring forward the healthy part of you, the part that knows how to handle those situations in a healthier way. If you find yourself unable to come up with healthier coping strategies, to come up with healthier alternatives, ask yourself, what would you recommend your best friend, your sister, or, I don't know, an 8-year-old do in a similar situation? And I recommend doing this, imagining what would you recommend to someone else, someone you care for in a similar situation, because when your eating disorder self has been running the show for long, your healthy self will probably find it hard to come forward. But when it's about someone else, we usually know what's the healthy thing to do, even if we can't apply that to ourselves at that point or can't give ourselves the same advice. The point is to practice until we are able to do that, until we are able to tell and do what's healthy for us. Reading about the concept of the two selves and doing this assignment really hammered it home for me that my eating disorder self is, not an outside entity, it's a part of me. And that was partly because looking over all those functions my eating disorder self served over the years made me realize that no outside entity would do such things for me. No external thing would try to serve all those functions that were at times contradictory. The only way that would work is if my eating disorder was a part of me and it got its power from me. And I'm not trying to invalidate anyone's feelings here. I know that it can feel like your eating disorder self is more powerful than you are, or it can feel like it's some kind of outside entity. But that's because your eating disorder self has been running the show for so long, and currently it speaks way louder than your healthy self. Your eating disorder self cannot be more powerful than you are. It is a part of you, and it's getting its power from you. And that means, and I think that's such a liberating revelation, that you can decide whether you strengthen your healthy self or your eating disorder self. Once I had understood that this battle wasn't between me and some kind of external entity, it was between different parts of me, I realized that I don't need to annihilate my eating disorder, and recovery shouldn't be this power struggle between, that imagined external foe and between me. And that helped me understand that being hostile and mean towards my eating disorder self was not the best strategy. Because if my eating disorder is a part of me that is already broken and hurting, then showing kindness and compassion toward this part is a way better policy than, being mean to it and kicking it when it's already down. That's it for this video. You will find a more detailed explanation on the topic in the 8 Keys book by Carolyn Costin and Gwen Schubert, and you will also find the writing assignment I talked about on page 41. All of these assignments in the 8 Keys book and the 8 Keys workbook are specifically designed to help you understand certain pieces of your eating disorder puzzle better. These assignments are not just there to, keep you busy. That's it for the video. I hope you will have a great day, or at least a reasonable one, if you are going through something difficult.